In 1617, Michael Maier, who was the personal physician to the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, and an alchemist himself, publishes various books. This is one of them, Symbols of the Golden Table of 12 Nations. You'll see it's basically an alchemical timeline of influential people in the history of alchemy. First is Hermes Trismegistus, is where we begin this talk, and he's already been mentioned. He's famous for the text, the Emerald Tablet, which we've already been told survives as early as the 9th century Arabic version. In the 12th century, what's called the 12th century Renaissance, when Christians were translating Arabic material into Latin and other languages, it gets translated in 3 different Latin versions, and then into various vernacular texts, including famous ones like Isaac Newton's English translation, which you can find on Wikipedia. You've already seen part of this. What I'm going to do today is look at relations between image and text. This is very image-led. This is a beautiful image from Istanbul, the Book of the Silvery Water and the Starry Earth. It's linked with the Emerald Tablet, and basically, as you see in square brackets, mercury and sulfur. So I'm fascinated by the way these 2 essential ingredients for the creation of the philosopher's stone in medieval alchemy, that agent of transmutation for turning base metals like lead into gold, for example, but also later for other things, magical practices possibly, and also medicinal uses, mercury and sulfur are depicted in various ways. The Emerald Tablet itself is a very short text, and even in 15 minutes, we don't have time to do much. I'm going to focus on just 2 particularly well-known quotes that appear throughout the history of the subject. First is this one: what is below is like what is above, and what is above is like what is below. This is beloved of very many alchemists, and also, to be honest, practitioners of magic as well. The most obvious interpretation of this is above, below, and the symbols of the planets and the metals. These glyphs here represent both of those, both Sun, Moon, Mercury, for example, gold, silver, quicksilver. And they're occasionally discussed, as upper astronomy and lower astronomy. Upper astronomy being astrology, the powers, the influences of the stars, and lower astronomy, alchemy. It's also, to be honest, the influence of the relation of the planets, not just on the metals in the earth, but also on human beings. Often it's, for example, the sun, gold, heart in the human body, that organ. The moon is connected with the brain, for example, in silver. So you get this table of correspondences between different subject areas. One of the most famous commentaries on the Emerald Tablet is by a 14th century philosopher, Hortulanus, the gardener, sometimes equated with an English guy, John of Garland. And here's his comment: the stone, the philosopher's stone, is divided into 2 principal parts by art, the art of alchemy, into the superior part that ascendeth up, and into the inferior part which remaineth beneath, fixed and clear. And yet these 2 parts agree in virtue. Anything that ascends upwards it's volatile, like a bird, and is often represented by a bird symbolically. Mercury is a very good example of that. The fumes of mercury ascend upwards. What remains fixed at the bottom is sulfur, and the whole idea is that mercury is volatile, sulfur fixes it, and only if the sulfur fixes the mercury that it can survive as a stone in the fire do you eventually have the philosopher's stone. Okay, the other famous quote is this one: its father is the sun, its mother is the moon, the wind carried it in its belly, its nurse is the earth. So we've got 4 different principles here. These are often equated with this Aristotelian idea of the 4 elements and their qualities. So, for example, fire is hot and dry, water is cold and wet, and so forth. And these 4 elements of that sentence map onto it. Its father is the sun, well, fire, sun. Its mother is the moon, well, moon is often equated with water. The wind bore it in its belly, well, of course, wind and air. And then its nurse is the earth, well, okay. That's Aristotelian-trained alchemists who'd probably studied at university. They often make these correlations between them. And you get lots of images. This one is particularly cute. Johann Daniel Mylius, 4 women with vessels on their heads. On the left, you've got earth. On the far right, you've got fire. I always think of the earth as Sasquatch here, and the fire as Alice in Wonderland and the Cheshire Cat. But anyway, you have the relationship of the elements. But this alchemy and alchemists they do not agree with each other. They like to have differences, and they have different opinions about interpretations. Now, Roger Bacon in the 13th century, sometimes classed as one of the fathers of English alchemy, he says, no, these equate with the four humours of Hippocratic medicine. So he's looking at it from a medicinal context and says, well, the sun fire is yellow bile or choler, the earth is black bile or melancholy, all my students suffer from that, and then you've got water and wind as phlegm and blood. So you get variant interpretations, and really that's, I want you to be clear about that. Alchemy is not homogeneous, it's not one unified field, it's lots of streams going outwards. This is an image from Leonard Torneiser in the 16th century, and it's nice. It's an equation of the humours with alchemy and astrology far later. So this thread survives over hundreds of years of interpretation. I particularly like this one, possibly because it's slightly psychotic. The Aurora Consurgens in the 15th century is one of the early examples of alchemical imagery. You get one or two very rare images in the 14th century, but really the 15th century is when you start seeing images. This is a great one. You've got this on the left, this blue serpentine creature, and this is deadly mercury. Mercury is deadly. The Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland is mad because of mercury fumes from making the hats. And mercury is a toxin, is a poison. And this one is more than toxic. He's cut off the heads of a red and the white figure. The red figure is sun, solar. The white figure is lunar, is the moon. And remember this sort of motif of mercury with male and female figure, because we'll return to it. Close to this in the text, it should be noted that the philosophers have assigned different names to this operation. Some, for example, have said this work is achieved by calcination, burning, fire, solution, dissolving, water, distillation, as in evaporation in air, and then coagulation, making something solid like earth. So this is interesting that this 15th century interpreter, who explicitly mentions Hermes in this line, is saying these are not the four elements, these are processes. They're verbs, they're not nouns. They're things that we are doing. So again, it's interesting to see a different interpretation. Now we get back to Michael Maier, whom we met at the beginning, physician to the emperor. In the same year, he publishes this beautiful book. And if you've not seen it, go and look at a website called Furnace and Fugue, because basically you get 50 engravings and you get 50 pieces of music with 3 voices each performed. And it's written for the court of Rudolph. And it takes the line, the wind carried in its belly, its nurse is the earth, and it takes it further. There's a piece of music, so luckily I can't sing this. But it's interesting, because the wind carried in its belly, I imagine most of you imagined a pregnant woman. Instead, we have got a rock god, and I am sorry, I am going to say, this is Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin. And if you look carefully, it's gender bending. He's got a fetus in his belly. Why, you ask? Well, the person identified, this is the god of the north wind, Boreas. The north wind, as you may know, being Swedish, is cold and wet. Okay, and bear that in mind. The question that is asked by Maier is, who is this? Who that must be carried by the wind, you know? And the answer is, chemically, sulfur is carried by quicksilver. And the reason is, the wind is volatile mercury. It's cold and wet. The wind, mythologically, is cold and wet, and literally, and so is mercury. The embryo is fiery sulfur, the seed of the philosopher's stone, and that's hot and dry. So you've got the 4 qualities of Aristotle from that square I showed you earlier in one image. And the second image in the book is the nurse is the earth. So basically, in the first book I mentioned by Maier, the Symbola, you had Hermes as the first authority. Here, again, you have Hermes as the first authority from his emerald tablet. Returning to the image that we saw earlier from the Topkapi in Istanbul, looking at the bottom right-hand corner, it's interesting to see, if you look carefully, there's a white bird with wings at the top, often identified as an eagle, and then there's a brown bird, or a golden brown bird sometimes, often described as wingless, and this represents, as I've written at the top, volatile mercury, it has wings, fixed sulfur does not have wings, and the two of them together, a bit like a yin and yang, relate to each other and represent the philosopher's stone. That image, sort of early medieval image, well, medieval image, is translated in the 15th century into the Aurora Consurgens. But I want to argue that there's a bit of subtlety comes in, nuance comes in. And if we look at this is Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes is the Greek name. What's the Latin name for Hermes? It's mercury. It's the same name as for the substance mercury. And if you look at it, on this image, the bird with wings on the top is blue. I've already shown you that image of the snaky figure chopping off heads, that's blue. So we know that this is mercury, and it's interesting to see that the figure of the alchemist is also blue. So there's mercury as the alchemist and mercury as the substance, all sort of connected to each other. And what is really cute, if you go to Leiden University, the scribe who's copied this has got the idea of above or below, but has really messed up, because above is a bird and below is a fish. It's probably because it's Dutch and the obsession with raw herring. But it is interesting that it still fits. You've got that sense of the above and below, and the fish in the vessel, liquid is at the bottom of the vessel, the alchemical vessel. So a fish swimming there is quite a nice idea, even though, to be honest, fishes are often equated also with mercury, so it should be going upwards. Maybe it's a flying fish. But anyway, it's nice again to see how you can imagine how different traditions start developing. Someone looks at this and goes, oh, okay, symbolically that's different. Here's another example from the same manuscript tradition, the Aurora Consurgens, and here we've got how am I doing? Am I doing okay? Here we've got a joust. We've got the sun on the left, we've got the moon on the right. The sun is riding a lion, because the lion is Leo, astrologically the fire sign, one of them. And sulfur is hot. The moon is riding a griffin. The griffin is part lion, part eagle, but it's a bird, so it's volatile. And these are coded in. You don't need text. Anyone who knows the symbolism knows roughly what's going on. And they also know that the figure on the left is hot and dry sulfur. The figure on the right is cold and wet, mercury. And if you're wondering why the moon has a black head, if you've ever cleaned your parents' silver, you'll know silver goes black with age because of oxide. And this is it. People have written about this as a black sun. It's not. It's a moon. It's just the silver has gone black. And you get shot if you try to clean this on the manuscript. Another way of representing it, and this is early 15th century, and people are experimenting with how do you communicate with image as well as word. And you get this rebis. Rebis literally means two thing. And it's a hermaphrodite. It's two things which are separate that are brought together. I'd say different from an androgyne, which is united and then you separate the androgyne, like in Plato or like in the Bible. Here you've got a female figure and a male figure, and then this big eagle, like Big Bird from Sesame Street behind. It's blue. It's probably there for amalgamation, for joining two different substances. And you find it catches on, anyway, as a symbol. At the same time, around the same period, 1510, 1520s, you get the first German vernacular book in German language, the Buch der Heiligen Dreifaltigkeit. It's very religious, it's very imperial politics, and it's very much alchemy. So you've got Jesus above, you've got Saint Francis below, because the text is attributed to a Franciscan, Ulmanus. You've got a very Hello Kitty aesthetic, really, with pink alchemical equipment, glorious. And the author really does know some alchemy. This is not just eye candy. And you get, again, these hermaphrodites, but again, increasingly sophisticated. We don't have time to go into a lot of it, but you've got a solar tree on the left, a lunar tree on the right. You've got this, one of you mentioned a two-headed snake. Well, here's a two-headed dragon, an amphisbaena, representing Mercury, and so forth. You also get, as an experiment, the hermaphrodite on the left is a good hermaphrodite, and the analogy is with Jesus and the Virgin Mary. Mary is the vessel of Jesus. The bad hermaphrodite is Lucifer and his mum. Now, I don't know who Lucifer's mother is. You ask Per, he can tell you. But this image so creeped out people that it's not copied again in other manuscripts and books. The one on the left is, but the one on the right, I think, just gave people nightmares. Another image is this beautiful one from Berlin, the same manuscript series, but a different artist. It's the coronation of the Virgin Mary. And I've mentioned, the use of lions and dragons, the bestiary tradition of alchemy. You've got it here, but it's transferred into the animals of the vision of Ezekiel and the four evangelists. So you've got eagle, lion, ox, and angel. And it's interesting in this less lovely image of the same system that John's eagle, the eagle of John, is connected with an alchemical substance, salmoniac, which is its eagle in Arabic is related to salmoniac. So this Arabic idea has survived over the centuries quietly. Okay, sort of 1 minute zoom. Henry Khunrath, at the end of the whole sequence, for me, takes up on this in his Amphitheatre of Eternal Wisdom. He has the Emerald Tablet in Latin and German actually in his text. He has this lovely image of the hermaphrodite, but even more sophisticated. I won't go through, but it basically is covering the ground we've got. What I will point out is this. On the top, he has this composite bird, which is, alchemy is color changes. When you're looking in the vessel, you look at black and white and so forth, and these are all equated with birds. So there you are. You've got Fawkes the Phoenix from Harry Potter. If you've any Harry Potter fans, it's very hard to find photos of phoenixes. It has the word Azoth on its belly, which is a bastardization of the Arabic Alzalq, though 16th century alchemy said it's made of the first and last letters of the biblical alphabets, and it means primal matter and ultimate matter, the philosopher's stone. It's a composite word. It has the center as either the symbol for Mercury or the symbol for John Dee's monad, which is all the metals and all the planets combined. So we're going to end basically with, after experimentation in 15th century, you get this guy who is communicating alchemy with a composite bird and a composite word and a composite glyph. So it's a really sophisticated way of talking about how alchemy is combining things, uniting things and experimenting. And then we'll end with that image again. Thanks for your patience.